this is a tough act to follow, isn't it? I was like, why have you put me with AI as well, straight after the presenters? I'm like, this is a tough gig. But anyway, I am actually really excited to be speaking to you about AI and how I think it is revolutionising audio media in general. So, first of all, whether you are a cynic of AI or an adopter, I think that hopefully I will convince you at least that there's definitely something interesting in this space. So, a bit of a social experiment. There are quite a few of us here. Hands up if you've ever used ChatGPT. Okay, solid numbers. That feels good. Okay, and how many people have used interfaces in AI outside of that? So like Mid-Journey, 11 Labs, less? Oh, it's pretty good. Okay, cool. Now I know what levels I'm speaking to here. So quite a few adopters, and I have no doubt quite a few cynics as well. I see one over there. So hopefully I will be able to explain to you a little bit more about AI in general. And to start off with, I just wanted to start with a bit of definition of AI. So there's a lot out there in terms of defining what AI is. This is IAB's definition, which I think is helpful, but ultimately the most interesting thing around the definitions is that it is intelligence demonstrated by machines that kind of mimic humans, ultimately. And that makes it quite subjective, ultimately, what fits in and out of it. And then I looked more and more, I got into a real AI hole, I'm not even gonna lie. It was deep. And I got into the different types of AI, and then it got really complex very, very quickly. So then I decided to ask the expert, so I asked ChatGPT. Different types of AI, and that said there are 14 different types, and they ranged hugely from stuff which has actually been around for quite a long time, like machine learning, into stuff which is very much of the now, like natural language processing. That's what powers voice, for example. AI image generation, so you'll see in some of the images throughout, they're all created through AI. And then through to the kind of iRobot stuff right at the end, which is AI superintelligence. That's quite scary, that's hypothetical. So I'm going to stick very much in what is currently available or in the near future. And when I looked into how to navigate this complex landscape, I think the best way to do it is to simplify it into two different types of AI. One which is traditional AI, which is actually not scary at all, to be perfectly honest. It's very much in what we've been doing so far. If you look at the programmatic landscape, that's powered by traditional AI. So processing the information which we have and then creating a decision off the back of it. And examples of those might be predictive modeling, data analysis, etc., which might lead into programmatic bias, like I said, or dynamic creative optimization. I promise I won't get too techy. And then on the generative AI side of things, this is where things get really interesting. This is where things are being kind of focused. And I think this is where things can change a lot. So this is about creating something new. This is when AI generates something specifically. And examples of these are content creation, creative ideation, scenario generation, and a few examples like creating new adverts specifically at scale. So two different types. And to reassure you, audio is actually already an early adopter of AI when you start looking at it with this lens. So from a programmatic side, so a more traditional side of AI, how many times am I going to say AI during this presentation? We have the likes of Spotify, DAX, Bauer and Stream. A million ads would technically fall into this because they're piecing together information which has already been pre-recorded and then choosing it, in my opinion, although maybe someone will debate that with me later. And then voice sits very much in the generative AI side of things, even though Jordan's kind of said that it's not so good with northern accents, which I think is totally fair. It has come a long, long way. I believe it's now 17% share of radio listening through smart speakers, according to latest radar. So, this is big, it's established, and it clearly works from a user perspective. The AI behind that is basically taking voice, using natural language processing to put it into text, processing it, putting it back into text, and then taking it back into voice. So that's kind of how it works on a simplistic level. And there's some really interesting stuff within this space. I also started playing around with text to AI voice stuff. So 11 Labs are probably the best thing to look at for that. And it's quite scary what you can do. Like you can use Gwyneth Paltrow's voice and just say whatever you want to say. It's very strange. And then we have audio generation. So that's kind of, I'd say, more in its infancy. And that's, creating music. And that is its own other topic. And I am definitely not an expert in that space. So there are lots of different opportunities within AI. So what I wanted to speak about today and focus on is specifically for audio, how I think that insights can be powered by AI. So I'll go through that. How planning can be supercharged, and how I've got a couple of ideas of products which I think could be commercialized. So hopefully I've got something for everyone. But specifically I want to focus on media rather than creative, because that's my bread and butter. I work within media planning. So starting with insights. As a basic, I just think it's helpful to use open source AI to just start conversations. If you've just been briefed on something and you're not really sure about the industry, you're not really sure about what, I don't know, maybe you're in audio and you're like, I don't know. For example, here, I wrote a really grammatically bad query actually, which is around what are the biggest marketing opportunities for audio in 2025? And actually what ChatGPT came out with was fairly reasonable. Obviously, if you're using OpenAI, my challenge is that you have to make sure that you are not just assuming that everything it says is correct. But it's a useful starting point and inspiration point. So that would be my first recommendation. If you have a company and it's currently blocking AI, maybe think about opening it up, because actually it can be quite helpful. The second thing within our company, so at Omnicom and MGOMD, we use is closed source AI. So we have a tool here which is part of our tool suite, which is called Q. And Q is based on trusted publications and other data sources, of which I'm not going to say too much because I don't want all our competitors to do the same thing. And it looks at and it creates cultural trends through analysis through AI. So it ultimately looks at different sentiment, attitudes, topics, etc. And it helps us to create ideas. It also helps us to forecast the growth in cultural trends in certain topics and within certain audiences. So say, for example, we had a brief from a very well-known retailer within our company, and they wanted to know, we were working with a creative agency, and they wanted to know, is there a pattern around nostalgia at the moment? And then Q went deep. We all kind of know that there is a nostalgia trend, but it went into showing us and quantifying exactly how nostalgia is built at the moment, and a lot of it is generated through music. The Sugar Babes were referenced within the publication, and it also helped us to show and forecast the growth of it over time and within certain audiences. So instead of like picking on loads of different sources, it pulls it together, and we found this really, really helpful at making decisions on things. So that's the first thing. Well, second thing. The other thing from an insights perspective I think is really interesting from a media agency perspective, and I hope for media owners as well, is that it can help you to do quicker, deeper audience analysis. So again, we have a tool which it's like a plug-in into our audience tool, and it ultimately helps to build a bigger picture quicker of what our audience who we've segmented looks like. But it also helps us to identify who are the audiences on the periphery of these target audiences. So that's been incredibly fruitful and helpful instead of doing loads and loads of runs on TGI, Touchpoints, YouGov, whoever knows, definitely feels that. And I think that, within the radar space, using all of those surveys, this is a quicker way of doing some of this stuff, which gets you to very, very good answers. There is obviously an element, again, of check it, make sure that it's correct. But ultimately, I think if it's telling you something which is intuitive and helpful, that is a useful add. So ultimately, from an insight perspective, I think that AI can help to cut down on research time and focus instead on creativity and ideas, which I believe is incredibly helpful. So that's the first thing. I've kind of eased you in, if I'm perfectly honest, because I'm really about to go deep. Or maybe not that deep, depending on how you guys feel. So the second thing is planning. And at this point, I ask for you to just suspend your disbelief and just go with it and see how you feel about this. So something that we've been working on within OMG in general is synthetic data. So synthetic data, we have an OMG AI expert called Sean Betts. I've referenced him alongside Wikipedia at the bottom because he just is so forward-thinking in this space. And he taught me about synthetic data, and I'm genuinely really bought into this concept, and I think it's incredibly exciting. So synthetic data is information that is artificially generated rather than produced by real-world events. And I know that sounds really out there, so I'm going to try and bring it back into the reality. So there are, I think, six different ways that we can use synthetic data. And I think that it has the potential to really revolutionise audio planning. And this is just an example of an approach. So first of all, you can create new data sources. So for example here, create me an audio listening data set. It's really hard to read the screen, maybe I'll read it down. Create me an audio listening data set that includes their name, age, gender, traditional radio station, listening by hour and by platform, for example. That's the creation part. There's also a recreate option where you can say, which looks like this. So, which looks like Rayjar or Midas or whatever it might be. You can then rebalance the data. So then, for example, if you know that it's not actually aligned with the current national population, of course we know that Rayjar is, but as an example, you can rebalance it. So you can say, make it 50% male, female. You can also enlarge it. So you could double the number of people or even make it nationally representative. You can extend it. So you could say, actually, can you layer on top their consumption on podcasts based on X, I don't know, Acast, for example. And then lastly, merging. So overlaying Spotify data for detailed digital audio consumption. And you can start to see how you could actually really build a much fuller picture of audio insights and consumption overall. And that's kind of, I know that it's out there, but this is actually something which is possible. It's physically possible to do right now. And what you would use is the artificial data, the synthetic data as a spine for pushing all of these things together. So I've written a few examples of how we could actually try and piece this all together. So if we all collaborate as an audio industry on the output, we could actually create a full picture of audio, which is way more reliable than other bits here and there which we currently have to work around, which is great, and we have some brilliant, brilliant data sources, but imagine the full picture altogether. So the key thing is also that there's no need to share actual or sensitive data, because you're telling the AI what the data looks like, you're not giving it the actual data. So this would basically create a full picture of audio media consumption, which would supercharge our planning power. And I personally believe within audio, we're in kind of the best place to be able to do this first. So I'm kind of thinking first mover winning mentality, which is that, you know, it's a very small industry in comparison to what we're competing against. You know, it's not like looking at the likes of TV, BVOD, supplier VOD, online video, and trying to collaborate all of that together. That's tough. Audio, I think, is possible, and I think that that's a massive opportunity. So if anyone is interested, please do come chat, and I would be really keen to try and build it out. And my last thought is around products. So there are already, I've already said that machine learning, etc., is AI, so there's loads of programmatic products out there within the audio space. I think that there are a couple which I think are really interesting. The first one is AI audio contextual adverts. So listening out for different topics and themes or sentiment, like people are happy or sad or whatever it might be, and dynamically placing the advert into that context. That is something that media agencies really want. We want to buy contextual adverts. There's quite a few different reasons for that. The eventual demise of the cookie, ethics in planning and people wanting to be more responsible for their data. And in general, we know that there's loads of research to say, I mean, Radio Centre have absolutely loads of research to say that relevancy drives uplift. So we know that it drives some business results. We know that it is also incredibly relevant for the future. So this is a great area. I know that there's stuff in development here already, so I'm not taking someone, like, it's already happening, I'm pretty sure. But my thoughts on it are that I've seen examples of it from other multimedia planning, and what I can see is that I think Sky are a great example of doing contextual AI buys. So they partnered with IAB and they use the IAB categories, which I think is really clever. And they've also cracked the sentiment thing. So, you know, when you're buying into a contextual advert, say if you're, I don't know, a plane and you're BA, you don't want to be in a plane crash. That's a very obvious one. But there are certain linguistics and sentiments which are harder to differentiate, and AI is getting really good at differentiating it. So say, for example, if I say something about being sick in a sentence, I mean, you already know what I mean because I clearly can't pull off the alternative meaning. But let's be honest, I think that ultimately it's getting much, much better at differentiating between the positive and negative, and that is quite hard, but I think we're there to be able to do that, but that is incredibly important. So that's the first one. And then the second one I have is, again, a bit more out there, but it's about translating quantitative data into qualitative data. We just get those the wrong way around. So you can create audience profiles. I've already spoken around that. You can create what this target audience looks like, what their sentiment is, how they feel about certain stuff, what their behaviours are within media or purchase behaviour or whatever it might be. And the next thing that you'll be able to do is basically create a chatbot out of that persona and ask them those questions. And that becomes qualitative research, which is just super exciting and also free. Obviously, you know, it's not going to replace qualitative research. That is ultimately a little bit more reliable, but this is definitely indicative and something interesting. And it's maybe something you could add value, show as added value for your clients, potentially. Okay, I've done a bit of a whistle-stop tour. I have no idea how my time is, but my ultimate recommendation really is within AI to try and embrace it. Like, I'm by no means an expert within the AI space. I just find it fascinating. And I think that anyone can really lean into this, and actually we would all benefit from it as an audio industry. So I was going to say thank you, and lastly a shout out to Sean Betts's AI newsletter, because if you're interested in it, I would subscribe to the blueprint because it's really cool. And also, he's helped me loads with this presentation, so I should probably do that. Yeah.
Thanks, Flora. We got one question come in. My mind is blown. I'm going to feel so smart at dinner. What do you think on synthetic data?
Yeah, just throw it in.
Just throw it in, name drop it. It says here, when using synthetic data, how do you avoid or at least reduce bias when generating results?
You have to make sure that you're putting that in. It is really important. So there are, within AI, of course, there are preferences, etc., that it will auto-generate. So the more information you can put in it, the better. So within MG, we do a lot of inclusive planning, diversity planning to make sure that we're reaching, I don't know, neurodiverse people as equally or multicultural people as equally. And so it's really important actually to make sure that you're including it as an input. You could use that from YouGov data or something, and that would really help.
Fascinating.
Great question.
Please, one more time, put your hands together for Flora Williams.